Happy Friday, Empress. Last week we discussed what it looks like to be brave and not have our armor up all the time. And so this week we are getting into what it looks like to have trust and be vulnerable, really with each other in our workplace, and kind of focus on where being brave doesn't have to be so difficult. So, Travis, I'm going to turn this over to you. What are your thoughts? I know Renee, she kind of mentioned vulnerability, and how can we address it in our everyday life?
First off, hey everyone. I think if we just start straight from the source and kind of quote Brene, she says the definition of vulnerability as the emotion that we experience during times of like uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. What does that mean? Like, how do we break that down? And I think a lot of us hesitate to talk and discuss our feelings. I mean, let's be real. Nobody wants to be talking about their emotions all the time. Even then, just some of us would cringe or even become fearful or think that, a hypothetical where, we're seen as weak or, fear that, we'll be reprimanded if we do so. I think a lot of times we see that it's just like, well, I don't want to share how I'm feeling because I feel like I'm going to get in trouble or I'm going to say something that, I shouldn't. So that's kind of what I'm leaning towards, I think.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think there's always those fears associated with being an emotional person or talking about feelings with friends and family, let alone, opening up to your colleagues and your supervisors. And so why do you think that is? Like, how did we get here?
I mean, I can think of one thing in particular, and I'll briefly just kind of get into it because it's a huge, like, bigger conversation and concept that can be talked about later or whatever. But there's this thing called biosocial theory when it comes to understanding yourself and how you perceive emotions. Like I said, I'll just go into it very briefly. The first aspect of it of biosocial is the bio part of it, where you how you understand emotions differs from how someone else does. Like on a biological level, like I process emotions differently than you, and you the same. You process things differently, and how you may be sad or mad about something may be different to how I respond to that same situation. And I think understanding how we may differ from someone else is huge in understanding when to how to validate people's emotions. And then the second thing, of the biosocial, is the social aspect, and that's how we respond to emotions based off of the people that we surround ourselves with. We try to easily put this when we take an example of sadness, and depending on who is around us in our social setting, we may either emphasize that sadness emotion like very low because we're afraid of how people will validate it, or we blow up and make it this big thing because we feel like people won't hear us unless we make it a big scene. And so we just, we want our feelings to be heard and to be validated.
Absolutely.
So.
And yeah, knowing how we perceive emotions on a personal and social level, I think is huge. I think a lot of people see feelings and emotions as weaknesses, right? They feel like they may have to put on a front or wear a set of armor while at work. And I think Brene even mentioned in the book to feel is to be vulnerable. Believing that vulnerability is weakness is believing that feeling is a weakness. And so I don't want people who are listening or watching this to feel forced to be these walking, emotional, transparent beings at work. But I think the point is that we shouldn't feel like we can't talk about things at work. We shouldn't fear bringing up things to supervisors about something that, was just on our mind. We're humans, and we shouldn't feel fear chiming in on ideas about things. We should be brave and believe that expressing feelings about things or being vulnerable in situations is only an opportunity for growth. For example, I think, you and we spend 40 hours of our 112 hours a week that we're awake, we spend it together. And so some days I may just be out of it. And I think, you know me well enough to know that something is going on. And so I think we've talked about it, right? We've got to the point where rather than hiding our emotions and putting on this front, we usually talk to each other and tell each other what we want to know about what's going on. And so, if you think back to when we first kind of started our I don't know what you would call it together, but we started calling it our work marriage. Because really, if you're not working well, right, I'm wondering what I did wrong, and I think vice versa. And so talking about it puts neither of us in a position to wonder. And I think that that has been a really good feeling and kind of weight lifted off both of our shoulders. And I think I can speak for both of us on that.
100%. I mean, like just an example, like yesterday, I sent you something and you're like, I like it. And I'm like, but you don't love it. Because I know, like, I know when you're passionate about things and I know when you're thinking about other things. And so it's just that it's that dynamic that, when we validate each other's emotions, we become stronger in communication. And that's huge. There's so much room for growth, and the more we feel comfortable with ourselves and those around us, the more opportunity there is to kind of also shift in work culture. We all have these things to offer each other, our colleagues, our work, our residents. We all have great ideas and visions, and we all want to be the best of ourselves. We all want to be the best that we can be. And so I would say, going into this next week for everyone out there, I would say go into it with a fresh mind and see if you can start building a foundation of who you want to see yourself become. I think that's huge. I heard this quote this week, it says, don't live the same year 75 times and call it life. And that's huge. Like nobody wants to, routine is okay. Like routine is something that's okay, but like seeing it as being available for growth and seeing the potential for it and to change things up and to switch things up, like we have to go into things with that mindset. And so I'd say make something new out of this year and create the best version of you. I mean, there's only going up. And so, it all just starts with a little bit of believing. Let us know what you guys think, what you think that we could work on or talk about. We work best with a little accountability. So, thanks guys for tuning in, and we will talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Bye.